Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jonathan Bailor here, back with another episode of the SANE Show. And very excited about today's show because we have some cutting edge information for you here today, something you've likely never heard about before because, not that I am a fount of knowledge, excuse me, by any sense of the imagination, but it's something that I had not even heard of before. So I too am interested to learn about it. It's coming from across the pond, as you will hear in our guest's voice, coming to the American. They're invading America with their new science that will help us to live better. It's a brand new book called the Sirt Foods Diet. Aidan and Glen, welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Great to be here.
Hi, Jonathan. Great to be here.
Cool. Well, Aidan and Glen, as you know from right before the show, I had to ask you how to even pronounce what we were talking about today. So could you just give us a really high-level overview for the viewers and listeners about so the book is called the Sirt Foods Diet, but what are Sirt foods and why should we care?
Sirt foods are a special group of foods, very rich in natural plant compounds called polyphenols, very specific polyphenols, which switch on a very powerful and exciting family of genes in the body called sirtuins. And these genes are responsible for a range of really quite incredible effects for health, well-being, longevity, disease prevention, and weight loss.
You said a very specific type of polyphenols. Can you give us an example of some of these foods? Because, like, for example, we're really big fans of green tea over here and cocoa. Are we talking about those kind of polyphenols or a different kind?
No, yeah, I think you're absolutely on the money there. So when we began to research this field, we identified 20 foods with the highest levels of these plant polyphenols, specific ones that we know interact with sirtuin genes. And they do include all the things you're talking about there. The cocoa, the green tea, coffee is another one. Certain spices such as turmeric actually are very rich in these compounds, but a lot of everyday foods as well. Things like kale and capers and celery and buckwheat, all sort of have this rich level of polyphenols. And when we looked at the research and identified the foods with the highest levels of these polyphenols, we identified 20 foods, but we're pleased to say cocoa and coffee and green tea and some of these, foods we absolutely love are incredibly rich in these amazing compounds.
And you just said the compounds are amazing. They activate certain genes. Is this an example of a term that's getting thrown around now a lot, which is epigenetics? And if so, what is the epigenetic impact? Yeah,
I mean, if we could just go one step back and then we'll kind of come full circle, really. So I think probably the best way to give this some context is to kind of trace back the origins of this idea. And I'm sure your listeners will be very familiar with caloric restriction and intermittent fasting. For a number of years, there's been a huge interest in how caloric restriction extends lifespan and health span in lower organisms. It's not fully proven in humans yet, but there's a wealth of evidence that these dietary interventions have these profound effects on our biology. And they do this by activating this family of genes called sirtuins, which once they're activated, have a constellation of effects on our metabolism and on our cellular health. What was amazing to us when we, became very interested in this field was that certain plant foods and their constituents activate the same pathways, the same biological pathways within our cells that calorie restriction and fasting do. So it's kind of an exciting idea that you can mimic the effects of something as powerful as caloric restriction and fasting through the consumption of a high level of these polyphenols. So that gives you a bit of the background to how we got hooked on this idea. The pharmaceutical industry, so Aidan is originally a pharmacist, so he'll give some great insight into this. The pharmaceutical industry have been red hot on this issue because they know if you can harness the power of sirtuin genes with a drug, a magic bullet drug, that you can sort of, reap these amazing benefits. But we think food's the way to go. And Aidan, I'm sure, will share some amazing things on the sort of pharmaceutical interest in these compounds.
I think, like, when it comes to dieting, nutrition today, the whole nutrition industry is caught up with calories and macros. And these are like the fuel of the cells. And even when we're talking about caloric restriction, we're still focusing on this rudimentary approach to nutrition. That, calories in, calories out. And what we have to realize is this totally overlooked aspect of these polyphenols is they maintain the function and health of the cells. And they set the point of how efficient our cells work, their metabolism, and they have profound effects on repairing and eliminating damage to our cells and stopping these metabolic imbalances. So they determine how well our bodies work, and at a health level, they set our cells' fitness or efficiency or resistance to disease, and at a metabolic level, how well we burn fat, how insulin sensitive we are, and basically how effective we are for maintaining or achieving that body weight that we want to achieve. And it's almost like the thing that struck me when I worked in pharmacy. So I worked as a pharmacist for 5 years in both the industry and in the community was, at the same time I was doing my master's in nutritional medicine. Nutrition, everyone sees as pharmaceutical industry and nutrition as like the pharmaceuticals couldn't be any further from nutrition. But actually what I discovered was I felt nutrition today couldn't be any further from nutrition, because we were so caught up in that rudimentary calories and macros that's been around since the 1850s. And what I discovered, what I was shocked by really, and I guess a lot of people know, but about 50% of our drugs start off as plant compounds. And if we look at like the most common drugs used today, like aspirin, even the statins or metformin, they are all derivatives of natural plant compounds. And I'm not talking about, a starting block which they totally modify. I'm talking about these drugs in their plant forms have the same effects in the body. So if you take metformin, which comes from French lilac, in the 1600s, that's like the most common drug used in America today for type 2 diabetes. In the 1600s, that was used in its plant form for type 2 diabetes. They didn't know why, they just knew it was used to treat a condition called sweet urine, which we know today now is a hallmark of diabetes. In America, since the 1920s, it's been researched for diabetes use. It was only 60 years later that it got approved for use. And what we now know today, which took another 10 years to discover, was that the effects of metformin are through working on these sirtuin genes, these caloric restriction genes that Glen has mentioned, and exerting the effects through basically the pharmaceutical or the plant nutrient that they contain, and you don't need that caloric restriction. What we're saying is that to achieve these benefits, the health benefits, there are far more advanced ways and far more accepting ways for the general population. So I think we've made nutrition very hard, and we've made it very contentious. And if we look at all the arguments I did today, we can't reach an agreement on whether it's fat, calories, macros, polyphenols. But if we boil it all down, we just need to take it as the whole food form, really. And I think we just this missing piece, the polyphenols in the diet is just this missing piece that we've neglected in nutrition, and we've either got a choice now to include them in our diet and reap the benefits that they contain, or we allow the pharmaceutical industry to continue to exploit them, which they're doing at the moment, and to develop them into these anti-aging drugs. And at the moment, the first anti-aging trial has been approved by the FDA and it's been undertaken. And in the whole nutrition industry, we've just totally overlooked it, even though it's based upon plant compounds. And that is really kind of the message that we're trying to get across, is it's this totally neglected group of foods, these whole new food group that we should be including. And if we look at the populations that live to that have the leanest phenotype and live to the longest life, the highest amount of centenarians, they eat 10 times the amount of polyphenols in a natural diet as we do in America today. Yet, when we look at all the dietary advice, whether it come from the US Eat Well plate or popular diets that are out there today, how many of them actually say in their dietary guidelines go beyond the macros or the calories or the food types and actually look beyond this to the polyphenol content that they contain, when it's now the evidence really points that this is where all the benefit comes from in setting how well our bodies respond to the food and how they utilize it, whether it be for harm or for benefit.
And I think this is extremely, extremely powerful because, like you said, the questions we ask really determine the answers we get. And the questions we're asking right now, as you said, are just talking about macros or calories, or is it a plant, or is it an animal, or is it paleo friendly, or is it low carb, or is it Mediterranean? But we're not actually asking questions like, does this food contain the properties that are essential for human life? Or does this food contain the properties that are toxic and addictive? Which seem like obvious and helpful questions, but if you think about it, tell me a popular diet that asks those questions. They don't. And it sounds like you gentlemen are introducing a new type of question onto the scene, which is, let's look at a food. We can essentially evaluate, like, how much of these specific polyphenols does it have, and then make decisions about how we can get more of that into our diet. So give us an example of, I don't know if you can give us all 20 of these foods, but if you could highlight, let's say maybe 7 of them, lucky number 7, and then everyone will have to get your book to get the other 13.
Was it the 7 foods or the actual specific polyphenols that they contain?
Let's go your 7 favorite foods to help us increase these therapeutic polyphenols, because we over here at SANE, we do not like starvation dieting. We think that causes eating disorders and all kinds of other badness, but we do know that there is some promising research on it. So if we can get those benefits without starving ourselves, that's what we want to do.
I think you've sort of encapsulated the whole premise of where we started, which is we know there are these great benefits from a practice which is pretty grueling and pretty difficult to stick to, which is fasting or caloric restriction. So we absolutely believe in eating our way to the same benefits, which is, quite a nice positive and refreshing message. How about we give 3 or 4 each? I'll give you my 3 favorite. Aidan can give his 3 favorite. So I guess you can go first. It's unfair if I go first, isn't it, Aidan? So I'll pick.
Okay.
So you're first up.
Okay, so the first 2, I think if you're anything like the UK, you're caught up in the sugar debate. And you're going to be looking at foods, you're going to be looking at the labels, and you're going to look at how much sugar this contain. And in terms of, if, as I say, keep harping back, and, it's down to this reduction to macros and people saying all foods are equal. Like, if it fit the worst thing I hate, this might turn off 80% of your listeners, so sorry, apologies that you've just lost them all, but if it fits your macros, it just has no understanding of nutrition and health and how foods interact at the cellular level. So apologies, but for the remaining 10%, let's give an example. So if I said to you a food was 66% sugar content, you're like, oh my God, get out of here. So one of the foods included in our top 20 is medjool dates, which are 66% sugar content. But do they raise blood sugar? No. Do they raise triglycerides, fats, which represent how well the liver utilizes insulin and sugar handling and fructose? No, they actually lower it. There's now research on medjool dates with a 66% sugar content as a functional medicine for treating diabetes. So how can, if I take teaspoons of sugar, do I promote diabetes? Yet if I take it in the form of a medjool date, can I help diabetes? And that is one of the key powers of polyphenols, how to regulate how our body responds to the foods that we intake and work on the cellular level to ensure that we respond. Basically, it's like the instruction manual for the food we have. And this is what's gone so wrong with diets today. They're so nutrient devoid. They're not in their natural forms. When our body's exposed to them, there's no instruction manual and we don't know what to do with them. So we get these sugar dumps and these fat dumps and our cells are going crazy. So medjool date is always a good example for me because we use it with diabetes to help treat it, yet it's really high sugar content. Sticking with the sugar debate because it's so, I guess I'm just biased because it's a bit of work we're doing here in the UK. It's just prolific in the UK, where the sugar in Ireland, even where I'm from, we just introduced a sugar tax in our most recent budget. So, and our kind of philosophy.
And
what's that?
Speaking of sugar, I'm going to pretend like I just ate a bunch of sugar, and we're going to have to list these foods off a little bit faster because we're running out of time.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to give you the last two then and let Glen in. So second one, I'm going to stick with the sugar debate. Strawberries. Why? Because no matter what carbohydrate you mix them with, they lower the glycemic index. So you add strawberries, a high glycemic index food, they work to lower the glycemic index. That's proven in intervention studies. Last one, everyone's favorite, coffee. We were told that coffee was a toxin. We now know the evidence is like that it increases telomere length, which is basically the insulation of our DNA. And we believe that's the #1 predictor of longevity. So instead of coffee being a toxin for us, we believe it lengthens life. And we now have research to show that it protects our liver health as well. So I'm going to pass over to Glen for history.
I knew you'd steal my favourite one there with the coffee. So, I mean, I think I'll get straight in there with extra virgin olive oil. And I think just for the same reason Aidan has said here, look, if we're obsessed with macros, how can you pick a food that is pure fat as one of the healthiest foods on the planet? But there's such a wealth of research to show that extra virgin olive oil, incredibly rich in olive polyphenols, is, you know, food as medicine, one of the healthiest foods we could possibly, and the hallmark of diets such as the Mediterranean diet. So that's straight up there. You know, next up is obviously the cocoa and dark chocolate. You know, what's interesting is the way cocoa is processed. A lot of the flavonols, which are the polyphenols that are especially good for us, are removed. But, you know, cocoa's right up there as a great cardiovascular booster, brain health booster, and just all round good anti-aging food. And just because it's late on a Friday night here in the UK, I'm just going to opt for red wine, just purely as that's exactly what I feel like drinking at this time on a Friday night. So they're my three abbreviated top Sirt foods.
Awesome. And I believe if we were to add a seventh, I believe green tea is also in that category of 20. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And we're especially enthusiastic about matcha green tea, which is a powdered form. So you're ingesting the whole tea leaf, and the levels of polyphenols that you're ingesting in that form are significantly higher. So, you know, that's, you know, what we call green tea on steroids.
I love it. Well, this is going to be very exciting for our listeners because dates are part of, interestingly enough, all of our SANE bars. They are a key source of sweetener there because of those therapeutic benefits.
We didn't know that in advance. There's no like checks on the way around.
Nope, not at all. And if it fits your macros, don't like us either, because remember, we wrote this book, which pissed them off very much. So it's all good. We didn't alienate anyone there. Strawberries and coffee, also a wonderful part of a sane lifestyle. So everyone's going to be very happy to hear this. Olive oil, one of the oils that we do recommend when oil is in use. Cocoa, abundant. Red wine, one of the sanest forms of alcohol on the planet. And green tea, we're huge fans of. So this is all going to be great news to listeners of the SANE show.
I think that's the point, though, really. It's bringing an emphasis to these foods, and we know they're good for us, but we never understood why. Yeah. And now we are finally understanding what these foods are doing and understanding they're working at the cellular level. And by understanding this, it allows us to place a much greater emphasis on it and to understand what other foods also have these properties as well. So as you say, it sounds like your SANE Solution is pretty much nailing it, but it adds a bit of an insight to your readers why they gain such profound effects going beyond the calories and the macros.
Absolutely. And it is important, as we've talked about here, and the reason why it'll be great for our SANE viewers and listeners to check out your book is because, again, we always hear just paleo, just low carb, blah, blah, blah. No, there are specific foods that are therapeutic that we need to go out of our way to eat more of to reverse the underlying causes of obesity, diabetes, depression, and all these things which plague us. So with that said, where can folks go to get a copy of the book, to learn more online, and to learn more about the rest of these 20 Sirt foods and what they do inside our body?
You can come and check us out at thesirtfooddiet.com, and you can link to all our social media etc. that way, and find out a bit more about us guys and what we're doing and what we're saying. The book, I would hope, is available from all good retailers across America and, Amazon, etc., etc. So it shouldn't be difficult to find, but come and check us out online as well.
Beautiful. And can you go ahead and spell that for us? Because I think some folks in the US may spell it incorrectly, as I would have before I saw the word.
Yeah. So it's the SIRT, which is Sirt, short for sirtuin, which are these genes. So SIRT FOOD, the Sirt food diet.
I think we'll get the food and diet part. It was the Sirt part.
SIRT, which is an abbreviation of these amazing genes, which I'm sure your listeners are just, going to want to find out a whole lot more about.
Beautiful. Well, Aidan and Glen, thank you so much for joining us today. Obviously, we just scratched the surface, but what we talked about was fantastically exciting because it gets to the heart of what we always talk about here at SANE, which is really understanding the science, not just having dogmas, not just having these sort of diet mythologies and treating it almost like a religious debate, but it's pharmacology, it's neurobiology, it's endocrinology, it's a science that we can study, that we can and should, but we've lost sight of that. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today and for writing the Sirt Foods Diet book.
Thanks very much for having us, Jonathan.
Absolute pleasure.
Well, listeners and viewers, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Obviously, we just scratched the surface, so please go check out the Sirt Foods Diet. Again, it's the Sirt Foods Diet, and that's SIRT Foods Diet, as well as the Sirt Foods Diet book.com. And remember, stay sane.